And people can see as possible.
Lift up your rear legs.
The chair.
There it is. Yeah.
You good?
I'm gonna have to put that up. We'll fix that.
We're good.
All right. This is a Behringer wing, which is a bad mama jama for the amount of money they charge for it. These are generally the input strips. These are generally DCA strips, and these are generally, well, normally your mains, but I have it set up to be your money channels. So you got pastor, pulpit, and baptistry here, and then a mains DCA. We'll talk a little bit more about DCAs probably right about now. So, unlike your other board where you basically had stuff patched 1-to-1, if you wanted to move stuff from this fader to that fader, you'd move the cord from this input to that input. Yeah, this board doesn't really care. You can put 384 different things into this board at the same time, and you can theoretically mix up to 96 of them. Which, if everything was stereo, you could get literally 96 channels on this board, which is crazy. So how you can actually tell what is associated with a fader, one, as I mount these faders, you notice that the scribble strip changes, so I can see, one, what the fader is, and two, you'll also notice that the faders also change. So no guessing in terms of what's. I think your other board also had moving faders, right?
No, it was all digital.
But I mean, oh, that's right. You just had the
It was
touch
just a
thing.
digital screen. We had no faders.
Got it. So, but at least the faders changed in theory because it's all digital.
Well, they did change.
You
yeah,
just had no faders.
you could see a fader. You couldn't.
You can
touch it.
see the levels, anyways. All right. So, I have the board set up so that this is mostly my inputs, and then this is DCAs. What a DCA is, I call them one rings to rule them all. So if I want to adjust all my vocals, all 17 people at the same time, I can have all of them. If I push this button, it shows me everybody that's assigned to that fader. When I move this fader, it effectively moves all these faders at the same time, which affects all of their post faders, so all of their sends going to effects. It affects, because it's a fader, the panning is still the same. It's not like you have to go through a group and have a stereo group in order to, it's just a remote control. It's a multiplier of these faders. Now, with that said, if this is down, and I'm down here, say I have my bass unmuted and I'm trying to figure out why I can't get any bass out. Well, there are some hazards to a ring that controls everything, which is if it's off, it don't work. So if you have a question, check this. Now you'll notice some buttons down at the bottom of a lot of the inputs. Right here you don't, but over here you see that the 4 and back and 4 forward are lit. So if I go 4 forward, I have another DCA for the choir mics over here. It should be muted right now. Yeah. That way the choir mics can just stay on all the time. If I want to actually adjust the level, I just tab over, go over to my choir mic, and I can move it up or down, and it'll move the two choir mics together. The choir mics have been basically rang out, so they're not EQ'd to sound great. They're EQ'd to get the highest level of gain before feedback.
And where did you do that? Did you do it on the individual input strips?
Yeah, so if I go here, you can see that was for one choir and that was for the other choir.
So if you wanted to make them sound good, where would you do that?
Same place.
Okay.
Chances are, and it depends on how much level you need.
All right.
But a mic like that, usually gain before feedback is your first priority.
Right.
And it's often, if you get something to sound right, it's going to sound right because you're also killing all that other sound that you didn't want to hear. So the two usually work together,
Right.
not always. Your baptistry mic, I think I actually EQ'd it to sound right the other day, but it will, you know, your feedback may be an issue with that depending on how far away he is or not.
Right.
We did figure out how to turn this on, so if I go back to my choir mic and I guess that is unmuted, and now I can turn this up. Hello. So you can see
That's way above you.
now on here. I'm actually going to tighten that cue. And it looks like I have one more here. I can take that one. Take that there. Turn that down a little bit. Nearly cue. So the reality is I can hear my clapping from here on that microphone. But all that to say, and I can actually see myself talking. This DCA up here, or the RTA now, I got to work up above your screen. I'm going to see if I can possibly change the color to maybe a red 50.
Much
Yeah,
better.
that's a little easier to see.
Yes.
And maybe we can even make it a red 75. Yeah, you can see that for days now. Alright, so bring that back down to normal. Mute that. And now I can't hear myself think anymore. But that should be on every channel now. Because even though I did it under the global, or under the settings for each channel, that is a global setting. So your RTA is now available on all of your EQ. It's a little bit different that it's not going underneath your EQ curves, but in some ways it's a little handier because you're not actually trying to see the RTA under the curves. So, I don't remember. Did your other board even have an RTA built
Yes.
in? Okay. But it's handy. Like I said, these are your money channels. Your mains over here is your overall loudness, and it is actually a DCA that controls both the level going to your left and right, and the amplifier actually takes left and right, and then it sums them together and sends it to those two speakers. So those two are mono summations of those two speakers, because anybody over there wouldn't want to miss what's going on over there. It wouldn't make sense. So they're just mono. And really those speakers, they have a pretty serious high pass on them, like 400 hertz or something like that. And they're really meant just to add some clarity and some top end to those speakers up there. Because most of the low mids, the high mids and low mids are mostly going to get back underneath there anyways. So, and then the subwoofer is actually processed. It goes through a subwoofer main, and I'll show you that in a second. Well, I'll show you too right now. On here, you have yeah, we can do that. This strip over here is kind of like your way around the board, so to speak. And I'll show you that in a second. But let's talk about this while I'm talking about it. You notice I took these two out. This is your main, that's your sub. And she knows how to find them again if you ever needed to find them. The sub, and then this is your sub matrix. So this channel goes to that channel. This channel has all of your EQ and processing for the sub, and then it goes straight to the amplifier. But these two, the problem with these two, and then this feeds that one. The problem with this is when you change your main level, your subwoofer wouldn't change with it. Well, that's awkward. If I just need to turn everything down, all of a sudden everything just got a little wonky. So what I did, I just made them go away completely, and they're all controlled by this. So this DCA actually controls both your mains and your sub, so that they go up and down together, and then all this just went away. So it's out of sight, out of mind, can't break it. And And what I could do is, for example, if I go here and I wanted to add something to that, say make it really easy to find my my vocal effects or something, I can assign and go to buses, and I can go to Vox verb, just drag that over there, and Vox delay, drag that over there, and it pushed everything over to the right a little bit, and I'm not sure why, don't care. Oh. So now when you look down here, you have your Vox verb and delay right here, so you can screw with that without having to go to your bus master and then tab over 4 times to actually find it over here. But they're the exact same channel. If I hit select here and then I go to here, it's the same thing that's selected. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So it's not a copy of the channel, it is the channel. Back to here. Let's look at your drums. Notice I have sound going to your mains and to your sub both at 0, and that way they're both, they're dialed in. That's the way it should be. And then this level will affect what's sent to both of those. In fact, it affects what's sent to all 4 of those. Then your broadcast mix is what goes to your live stream. It goes to your 70 volt system. It goes to your hearing assist system, and
Does that go to the cry room too?
yeah, the cry. Well, that's what I call the 70 volt system.
Okay.
Even though it's not
That's the-
70 volts.
It's the
Should be. But
That's
it's
the
not.
cry room and the lobby, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Because it's the same wire.
Okay.
So, but it has its own EQ. So if I go here, that EQ is kind of for those speakers to make them attempt to sound a little happier. There's only so much you can do with them. And the live stream, we may actually put a separate EQ on that channel as well. And the hearing assist may roll off a bunch of lows.
Do what?
We'll definitely need to do that, have the live stream at different EQ than what these 2 speakers are.
So the live stream, no, these speakers
No,
come
I'm-
off your mains.
No, I'm talking about the
Right.
cry
Cry
room
room.
and the
And
lobby.
they do, because the broadcast mix, actually you shouldn't have that on there. That should be on the live stream. Your live stream mix should have something that kind of looks a little bit maybe like that and like that-ish, maybe theoretically, possibly. We'll find out once we actually dial things in later. And maybe a little bit more highs, because that's the way those things roll. But we'll verify that later. But that's your actual EQ going on to your live stream. We'll verify that with the headphones and say if that's gonna work.
And that's why you need flat headphones, so you could hear that.
Well, and also it helps you know the levels of the instruments a little bit better too. But yes, it also helps with getting that generally-ish right-ish.
Does it matter whether or not you roll down the low end at all? A high, do a high pass on it, so that there's no rumble or anything?
On the on this, so most of the inputs will have that on it.
Okay.
So by the time you get here, you won't need much
It's
of that.
already done, yeah.
But we definitely could. I don't remember if. So I go to shelf and I go to settings and I say low band is actually a cut was I can actually
Hmm.
put that there and use that to keep, some things. Also on the live stream, there is
Please.
that, and there
I'm
is
about to die.
that. No, by the time you're done, you should be able to get your live stream mix pretty freaking hot, without clipping.
Cool.
So when you listen to it on YouTube, it won't be like I ran out of volume control. I mean, the send you'll be sending by the time we're done will be like, okay, that's smoking.
Well, that's what I tried to do and I was looking at the monitor the other night when we were watching it over here and seeing where it was going to, and it was much hotter than we were
Before,
the output than what we were able to get out of the other one.
yeah.
This is just a limiter or a compressor also?
So I have basically this is a leveling amplifier.
Okay.
It's an optical compressor that as you crank the sound and the song gets louder, the needle kind of goes back, but it doesn't recover all the way, so it's not going all the way.
Right.
It just kind of so it basically brings the whole level down. It's still riding the peaks, but it brings the level down. And then this one is an actual limiter. So you should be able to hit 1 or 2 or 3 up there occasionally.
Right.
And then you'll know that, okay, I'm hitting that thing about as hard as I want to. You don't want to, if you bring it down to here, you'll be crushing things
Right.
pretty hard. You won't like the sound of that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then this level, the out gain is set to -1 decibel, so I can't clip if I wanted to. In gain is how much I turn it up until I can start seeing the little blue lines at the very top. Squeeze and knee, attack and release is kind of some compression, massaging of how the limiter works. But that is a cool tool. And it's cool that you have, a bus that you can put that kind of stuff on. And
Now, is that gonna
Yeah.
be available to change on the tablet? Once it's set up? Are we gonna be able to get in there and fix that if we need to?
you should be able to.
Okay. I'm
Um,
just trying to,
If you want to grab my tablet from back,
Is that
I
what
think
you-
sitting on the soundboard
oh, okay.
or back there somewhere.
It's sitting next to it. You got it plugged in.
Yeah, that's 'cause they turned
The
on
Wing Copilot is
no one's in there.
definitely different than the Wing. So finding your way around on this thing is a little bit of a challenge.
See, and that's what I'm gonna have to know how to do. That's why I brought mine in to make
Good
sure
ask.
that I have that ability to
I do, I just
look
never
to
loaded
this
it on
thing,
my,
cause I don't know
on my
if this is a
phone.
proprietary situation where it has to say, okay, this piece is
Okay.
recognized.
What am I attached to here? I don't want to be an LBC guest. I want to be an LBC office.
Right.
Now when I go here, it should find a wing. Oh look, it found a wing. If you had 3 or 4 of these, you could name the wing.
Mm.
So you could say, this is the studio, this is the live. I'm not connected. So on here, this is like, when it says performance setup, this is like before the show, you're up on stage, you're trying to figure out, okay, I'm plugging stuff in, blah, blah, blah. And it gives you the places to plug things in, name things, color things, do whatever things. And then your channels, so sources is how, this thing thinks in sources in terms of the inputs are sources, and then channels are a place to mix. I'm not a huge fan. I just want to know whatever's plugged into, and I'll show you that in a minute. But your outputs, this is basically the same as going to routing and going to outputs here. It is, hey look, that screen looks really familiar. And it is exactly the same thing. If I hit drum IEM. Right now it's on 4L, but say I unlocked it and I changed it to 11R. It should, in theory, change it on there as well. And I'm not sure why. Oh, it's because I'm not on 4. I was over here on 4. So yeah, I just changed to 11R. Now I really want it to be on the drum IEM though.
That's why.
And so you can see that's exactly the same thing. Talkback, it lets me know who all I'm talking to up there. I could theoretically talk to people in the mixes, but in reality, I can hear myself. I don't need to hear myself out of the speakers. B, I have set up to go to 6, which in theory might be Caesar's, if Caesar was wearing IEMs, but you know, that would be, for me, I'd probably make that just his IEM, whatever that ends up being. And then you just pick whatever source that is and go there. All right, next, if you click on this little thingy up here,
The hamburger?
is that what you call it? Sure. You see you got control metering, personal monitoring, front of house, SD recorder, and network. You don't really care about network as long as it works. SD recorder is actually about the same as it is on there. So not a lot there going on. Actually, I take that back. SD recorder, if I just go to SD card A, it does give me a little bit more information. Front of house is really, if you're the guy that's like driving the ship, you can actually basically, using front of house, take this thing anywhere in the room and do sound. This is a pretty powerful thing that you don't want to give to people up there, which is why they have WinQ. So I got all my channels available. If I click on a channel, it gives me a whole bunch of stuff about them. And then notice over here, these are all the things that I would normally have on this side. That makes sense? So that is,
Pattern. Okay, you
so go to front of house, click on a channel.
were, right, which I did.
So just click on the channel.
Okay. Oh, okay, and
Then
then
it
that
gives you
comes over
the
there.
right side.
Okay.
And then as you go down the list, so you wanted to know, can I do that one thing? So you would go to main matrix and you would say, I want to do the live stream. And I want to go to my limiter and I want to click there. And there I can actually adjust things.
And that's only adjusting it live stream.
This one is, yeah.
Yeah, 'cause
If
I'm
you're
now-
doing, if he's doing that over there, he's only adjusting the live stream. He's not doing anything to the house, right?
As long as he's, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. but
Okay.
you see how I'm changing that right there?
Yeah.
So this live stream is basically a live stream bus. Now, where things get a little bit weird, these fader levels are all, let's go here. These fader levels are overall fader levels. But what he wants, in theory, is basically post fader, post what you're doing. But say you wanted to change the piano, and he goes down to here, and he's got this, and he can adjust this all day long, without affecting this. But you shouldn't be using these faders because these faders on this side affect the house.
Okay, so that's what I'm trying to understand, is how that all,
So basically, main 4 is what's going to broadcast. And then broadcast spills over to live stream, cry room, and hearing assist. So broadcast really is, you really want to be thinking about that 4th fader on whatever, on whichever channel you're talking about. You can
Thanks.
you drive all sorts of channels around wherever you want to. Blah 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 more blah. And I was going to say in DCAs you can set up some additional DCAs for yourself, but you can't because those affect these faders, not that fader. That makes sense. Now there is a way, it's not set up this way right now, but in theory, we could make bus, I got 16, 15, 14, could make bus 13 your recording mix, and then you could even set up MCAs for that, and that may actually be a happier way to do mixing, but it doesn't work real well if you're not here and she's driving the ship. Because right now, the live stream mix follows the house mix, but it's not necessarily the same. It's like a slightly adjusted house mix. If you have either pre or post fader, pre-faders, mix and used MCAs, whatever, you would have complete control of those faders, but then whatever she does in the house won't affect that mix at all. So that's kind of right now it's set up so right now you're making fine adjustments to whatever's going on in the house, not driving your own mix completely separately and unadulteratedly independently.
Yeah, that can or can't be a problem, you know what I mean, as far as,
No, I understand, and what I would recommend is that you start with what it is right now, and if you're like, you know what, let's do this just like it was an IAM mix, and have a completely different set of stereo, completely different set of whatever, completely, you own the thing. Maybe you have one setting that is with Paul and one that's without Paul. The without Paul uses this system,
right.
and the with Paul uses
That
the
would
other
be,
system.
that would probably be the ideal thing
And
to
that
do.
would be because if something happened and you
Right.
got called away
Right. That
and
would-
he's out of town,
Right, that would be the ideal way to set it up.
Then- and I don't have anybody
If we
else
can set it
to-
up that way, that would be ideal.
yeah,
Okay.
because we
Um,
can test that tomorrow
Right,
while we are all in here.
You can test it right now in a few minutes.
I know, but tomorrow we can see what it sounds
Now,
like
here
at
is
the end.
Here is
I mean, I
one
have
thing
to
that
check
will
it.
happen, and the reason that I'm a little hesitant to making major changes to scenes like that up front, but there is actually a way to filter a whole bunch of stuff out, so it might not be that big of a deal. Is that anything that any cues or whatever that you change after you make that scene, well, do they transfer over, or do you get lost? Like, oh crap, I guess I have to do that on this scene too. We already did it on that scene, now I have to do it on this scene. But I'll show you a little bit more how saving things works. Back to input buses. So, anyways, is there anything else on the board? I don't hardly ever use this section because there's a big, glorious, ginormous screen right here.
It's funny, every video I saw, everybody says the same thing. It's a waste of space.
It's cool, but I've used it very rarely. So going down on this left-hand side, you got home. This is kind of your overview screen. You can kind of see everything. And interestingly, I can actually take this thing over here. So this is, let's go to an actual input bus. If I go here, I can actually make my compressor happen after my EQ. Or before, however that works. So you can actually, and you can adjust where the tap is, which is wherever you're taking stuff off if you're not taking it off of post fader. So I probably want to take the tap off pre-fader, but yeah. So if you click this orange or this little wrench icon, you can actually change the order of things. Whether or not you should, whether or not you care, that's probably a few years of practice down the road. The professional guys actually care about these things a little bit. I don't even care that much. The way it works, it generally works pretty well for me. On home, you'll also notice over here I got overview. Kind of gives me my gain, my trim, so we talked about gain yesterday, but I also have a trim level. and I'll show you that right here. There's gain. This is the physical amount of electricity used to convert a mic signal into a into digital whatever. So this affects everything, and it'll affect every board after this, etc., as well. But the trim, I can adjust the level beyond that, so for my mixing purposes. So if I had one board here and it's controlling the snakes everywhere, and then I had another board in the back room that he was using to do recording on, he wouldn't be able to affect this at all on his board. It would be locked out to him. But he would be able to adjust the trim and balance because maybe I don't need it that loud in the house, but he needs it more in his mix. And, you know, he's trying to mix down in here and he can't, so he can actually bump it up 18 decibels here. So trim is cool, and that's what that is. Back to home. Across the top, I got icon color, which is, you know, I have a lot of icons on there. It helps make things easier. You could say Cindy is a girl instead of a wireless mic. It's totally up to you. Don't care. It doesn't matter. Totally however you want to do it. Then the name is the name. And tags, this is really where you get into, like, say right now she's tied to the Vox DCA. That's what that tag is. If I had a mute group that she was associated with, that would be another tag. But that's what the tags are. You won't really care in general. Notice this thing over here. It says link customization to source. So remember I told you there were sources. And that little orange button can be an annoying thing sometimes. So sometimes you just turn it off. And then this doesn't necessarily match the source that it's associated with, which can be a problem or annoying. But generally speaking, like yesterday, I was trying to reorganize all these, and because it was changing my sources at the same time, it was annoying. So that's what that orange button does. This blue button on the left, that is caps lock. I prefer using this one over here, and the reason is because once I click that and I say, notice it's one capital and then small letters. If you use this side, then it stays all capitals.
Right, and the other one's a shift.
Yeah, however you want to put it, yeah. But it's basically caps lock, and that's just, yeah. Man,
On
you're
your
old
computer.
school, like typewriter.
Well, it says the same thing on your keyboard.
Yeah. So that's that screen, and then this is all of the stuff coming into your board. So I got my gain, I got where I'm coming from. I can also have an alternate source. So in my case, I have it coming from the card, and down here I have it set to auto for the purposes of virtual sound checks. If I, for example, had a bunch of tracks on an SD card that I was using for a Christmas show that I wanted to play live while I still have 3 people up there performing live with it, then I wouldn't do auto. I would turn the 3 I had up there to manual. They could sing over the top of everything else that was being played from the SD card. But under setup, if I go to audio, I could click main or alternate. So I hit alternate, now I'm playing off the SD card, and everything that's been switched to auto will be coming. And if you saw on here, it says card 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, blah, 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 versus main is actual inputs coming into the board. Does that make sense? So that's an easy way to do virtual sound check, but it doesn't work if I don't have this set to auto. Right. Then I have to manually go and say, oh, I want to use that one instead of that one for every channel, which gets to be old. But you can do it individually if you're trying to go for that effect. Like I said, it's kind of cool. You have low cut and high cut filter right here. They're also available on your EQ channel, which we'll get to in a second. If you had, for example, an old tape deck that you were playing and the audio came in like this, you can actually balance that and actually, make it come in like this. So that's what that's for. It's not really panning. It's trying to level your left and right inputs. Also, when I click here, this is where, for me, this is the easier way to assign an input. So local in is the 8 inputs on the back of the board. Aux in is the 8 quarter-inch jacks on the back of the board. AS EBU is a digital connection on the back of the board that you guys don't have. Well, you have it, but you don't have anything plugged into it. Oscillator, if I wanted to play pink noise, is a great place to find it. AES50A is this snake. AES50B will be that snake eventually someday, theoretically. And C isn't plugged into anything. However, you could plug in C to another soundboard if you wanted to make someday, like have your own little studio. Like just plug it into C and you get 48 channels going over there from wherever you want to. And then Cindy just went away. My guess is she is number 2. So let's go back to local in and put her there. And then SC Connect is a cool high-speed thing you guys aren't using yet. USB audio is not that one. It is an actual connection on the back of the board. The W Live Play is where all of your SD card connectors are. And right now, because I don't have them linked, I believe both cards read off of 1 through 32. But if you were to link the cards, you could actually do 1 through 64 and still have an hour of recording time if you had a lot of tracks you needed to record. And then you can also take it from buses, mains, matrices, or anything else you want. You can make stuff up. So I can actually have I could actually send a main back into a channel if I wanted to, for God only knows what reason. Kind of like you guys used to do manually with your other board. All right, USB player is that one. Now, notice back here that you have these buttons up here, the M stereo and MS. M is mono, which she's only one person. She doesn't sting in stereo real well until she's had some effects thrown on her. Then it becomes a stereo channel. But say you added a stereo keyboard. It still uses 2 physical inputs, but it only uses, and you have to make sure that it's odd even. So say you had channels 8 and 10 available because 9 is being used for something else. You would move 9 to 8 and then use 9 and 10 because it's odd even. But if you do that and then you hit stereo, then it locks out, it'll lock out those 2. I don't want to screw them up, so we're not going to, but that's how that works. MS is a really cool recording thing that you can have one microphone that's mono and one that's like a Crazy 8 going like this and have mid sides. It's basically like that, or mono, stereo, however you want to look at the signal. You'll hardly ever use it outside of a studio environment, so don't worry about it. All right, Cindy is fine, so we're going to close. I just wanted you to see that's where inputs come from. Any questions about that?
Until we try to do it.
Yeah, Roger. All right, gates. You guys had gates on the other one. If you want cool things, however, there are other cool things you can do besides just a dumb gate. You can put a gate in from a really fancy board. You can actually use compressors like a 1076 or an LA2A. You can put a wave designer on your drums on the gate side. That's pretty freaking cool. And then you can put an auto rider on your bass or even your vocals if you wanted to. And I think somewhere in here, yes, there's an old-fashioned de-esser that you can put on there. So you don't have to kill one of your effects channels to put a de-esser on a vocal. You can actually use it from the gate area if you wanted to. So say Cindy has, I don't need a gate on her, but she has S's for days. I can use this, adjust my frequency down here accordingly, how much I'd want to, kill the S's.
So you're basically playing with the knob until you hit the frequency that she's saying S with.
Until you're impacting her. And
Okay.
some, like I had a girl at my church, used to be the pastor's, well, she still is pastor's daughter, and then she married a pastor and moved to a different church, but then I moved churches. But anyways, but she had, I don't even know how she created these S's. They had to have been like 15K. I mean, they were amazing. I mean, they you run out of knob. I can't even hear 15K, and she was making S's. But that's how. That is a way to put de-essers on your vocals without having to kill effects channels. The same thing with compressors. You can either use a basic standard compressor, or you can use all sorts of fancy studio compressors, including the Wave Designer again. And I don't probably need to tell you, but that rack is worth a lot. Each one of those compressors is between $3,000 and $10,000 a piece. It's a pretty cool selection.
If you were to buy them.
If you're to have a rack of compressors,
compressors.
and that's per box,
Right.
and you have that box on every channel of your
Yeah,
board.
easy.
Now here's one thing: if you want to play around with it, that's great. But just know that if you go back from here back to here, you lost any changes you used to have on this. It doesn't remember it per unit. It starts over.
Even if you saved the scene?
If you had saved into a scene, you just have to reload the whole scene, which,
Okay.
yeah. But, or if it's saved as a channel, then your previous channel settings would come up. And I'll show you those in a little bit as well.
Okay.
Inserts, you have 2 inserts per channel. I don't even remember what that is. I guess it's nothing. So in addition, basically these are inserts. They are effects, but they don't count against your 16 inserts. If I turn it on, I go to here. I can either do, these first 8 can be anything. The second 8 are limited to standard effects, but I'm here to tell you there's a lot of standard effects. So you'll start here and see if, like, hey, as what I'm looking for there, you see I got all my compressors there, I got a sub-octaver, I even have pitch fix as a standard effect. I could put a pitch fix on every vocal I wanted to. Then you got a guitar amp, so like the other day when he was playing the guitar and all of a sudden, and I was just sticking him into a cool UK rock amp. So all that is available there. That's the standard. If I go back to or none, and then I say I don't want to use 13, I want to use this one. Now I can use either the diamond effects, which gives me all the reverbs are in diamond effects, as well as some cool stuff for like acoustic guitars, assuming they're not already putting a ton of stuff on their acoustic guitar. It's a little overkill to affect a highly affected guitar. Is like, okay, this is like a lot too much. But like that shimmer reverb on a clean guitar sounds amazing. I got delays, lots of reverbs, and including a reverse reverb if you want to put that on your drums for a kind of sound. In addition, on those first 8, I can use either any of these or I can use any of these. But you know, like, yeah, if these are all available on the second 8, and you know you're going to go for one of these, just use the second 8 first, and save the first 8 for any effects, you know, like vocal, yeah, reverb effects, whatever, blah blah blah. So that's how effects work. And Cindy on, and I don't really care. I'm going to give her none. So now insert is totally available. And then there's another insert there. Same thing. Now, I believe this is the fader. So, anything down here is actually,
The pre and post.
really the effects send. So on yours, not that. Like your Voxverb, they're all the lower effect, and the reason for that is they it is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's post fader. So and that's this. So the basic, by having it at the bottom, it is the send. So if I mute this bus, I don't kill my tails. That makes sense. It used to be, once upon a time, you would send channels from a bunch of aux channels, and you would, or you know, like, I want all my vocal effects. So for my vocal channels, I'm sending a little bit to my vocal bus, my vocal effects bus. It would then go to my cool high speed reverb unit, like you have at the top of your rack in there. Then the return would come back, and I would do this. And then even like on an X32, you have a send, you have the effects unit, and you have a return. On this, you just have a bus. If you use the top one, you're basically affecting the return. If you use the bottom one, you're affecting the send. It's a little non-intuitive, but using the bottom one, you don't lose the tails. So, for example, say I'm talking and I say, "Hi, my name is Trey." If I kill the returns, it'll go, "Hi, my name is Trey," and it'll be like, okay, somebody just screwed up. But by doing the sends and using this lower one, I keep the tails. So you can almost get by with a whole sentence before you remember to mute the effects, before people start sounding like, you know, dude, the sound guy's sleeping. Yeah. All right.
Don't go to sleep.
And then this.
Tough call.
This
Only one
is
of us
where
can
your
sleep at a
panning
time.
is. You can also find panning up at your home. It's over here. But this is your panning, and it's also the levels going to each of the to your mains, to your sub, and to your broadcast. And let's see here, on a bus. On a bus under home, this is where I turn a bus into mono or stereo. So you know where that is found. Not that you'll know, not that you'll care, but it's good to know that it's this section up here where you find the mono. All right, and then this section down here is just your sends. Notice on this board, every send by default is off. There's some good reasons for that on the soundboard, but it's an annoying thing that when you turn the fader on, you just kind of expect sound to be there. It's not. By default, it is all the way down and off. So I can turn this fader up all day long, and it won't do me any good until I turn it on. I'm telling you, it is definitely something to be aware of, because that is an idiosyncrasy of this board that can be sometimes annoying. All right, moving on. So we talked mostly about that. We talked about how to make your channels mono or stereo. your returns. These channels on the back, you have A1 through A8. Notice when I click here compared to here, I'm missing a bunch of stuff. What I'm missing is the gate and I think a second insert. So I only have one insert there. And the idea is that these are for already pre-processed pieces of music, sound, media, whatever. That's so you try and put a microphone in over here, it's not going to turn out well. I'm just saying. In fact, if you look up here, it doesn't even have a gain knob. What comes into the board is what you got to work with. You could use the trim to adjust things as necessary. But for things like the computer, for an MP3, which I'll leave this cable over here wherever it went to, if you want to plug a phone into or whatever, that's what your MP3 is. 2-track, I think, is from your USB back there. Actually, no, 2-track is this one, and USB 1 and 2. You have 32 tracks of USB back there. That if you were to plug it in, but USB 1 and 2 is by default there. I can put it there, and you can assign anything else you want to over here. You can take it from an SD card. You can put it from wherever. Doesn't matter, but just know that these A series do have some limitations. All right. Preamps we already talked about. The board has 8 of them. This has 16 of them. It's the physical things you can actually plug a microphone into. And patch bay, we kind of killed that to death, but you'll probably need to like refresh your memory. All right, next slide. We're making tracks. Organization. So how I have organized your board, I got all my vocal tracks here. I got my color tracks here mostly, except for my Pastel guitars. And I have DCAs over here because I like them. And I have all my money channels, Pastor, Pulpit, Mike, they're all over here, out of sight, out of mind. I can't screw with, no matter what page I'm on over here, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter, I always have access to the pastor as long as I remember where to find him. Which he's always here right next to my mains. Now this, in theory, also has buttons, but you probably won't use them very much more than just that top button, because yeah, it's probably mostly what you use. And so all of your guitars are down here, your choirs over here, your drums are on the second tab, and eventually there'll be kick, snare, hi-hat, ride, toms, and cymbals. And you'll still have a couple channels probably left.
And we'll be able to do that with those electric drums? Have individual
Yep.
inputs?
We have to have additional inputs put in to
Right.
accommodate it.
Right, but I mean, instead of just a stereo output, there's...
like 8 separate
Oh,
outputs.
alright.
And then eventually you may use a click. Your bass, you notice your bass comes in from channel 13 into bass low and bass high, and this one you'll probably adjust somewhat in your mix. You may end up wanting more high and a little bit less low just to get some extra clarity without killing all the bandwidth of your entire mix. But that gives you, you'll find sometimes though some songs you just need the low end to kind of hold the song together, and so you can mix, and that'll change in here as well. That you'll adjust these every once in a while in the house as well. And basically your bass low is you can see it's been it's got a big old low pass on there, and your bass high is everything else. But then the magic is on your bass low, there's a pretty serious compressor. On your bass high, there's not much compressor, but there's quite a bit of gain. I guess there's gain there too, but the end effect is that you get a pretty fat sounding bass, but I can add the clarity as necessary. Now that said, like when I asked you to adjust your tone the other day, I can't make stuff up here that I'm not getting. And I'd prefer not to have to, you know, if you only send me high tone, well, I'm not getting into low end of the guitar either. So, whatever you had it set the other day was pretty golden. That's kind of how the board's set up. And that's a case of, you know, if your source needs to change, understand your sources and know what can change about them. All right. And then you do have some spare channels available if you needed them. And there's lots of spare channels like over here. Yeah. These three mics over here are actually in 37 through 40. They're right here. Your talkback mic is not controlled here. I can do that all day and nothing happens. If I hold this down and I can talk and you can hear me talking into the monitors up there, and then I let go and automatically go off. But if I just punch it once and then I start saying bad things about Caesar because he's really annoying me today, well, he actually heard that. So that's
That's the Lord's fault.
what was that?
Like, plus the Lord is watching.
Anyway, so if I hold it down, as soon as I release it, it stops. If I just punch it once, it stays on until I punch it again. Also,
This
this
happened before to churches, I'll tell you that.
this level
Well, not to me.
has to be up in order to adjust that. Doesn't matter what this level is. That level is.
That's what controls it, the level.
And where do you have the talkback going to? Just the monitors?
So if I go up to here and I get my monitor set up, my talkback set up. So right now I basically, if we turn 13 into the recording mixer, you wouldn't want it in that. But basically all 12 monitor mixers, which you don't have yet. And talkback B should end up going to Caesar's monitor, whatever that ends up being. It could be a wireless IM, could be, yeah, I don't know, I don't care.
What about vice
Figure that out
versa? Would it be the same? I know, like, how we do it. Like, do we have any things that we're going to change over there, whatever, stuff like that? For example, we went to the funeral and we and my friends were there, but we were able to talk from over there, and the tech guy was able to hear everything what we were saying through that talkback mic that we have over there in the front. And so I don't know if we should get maybe some speakers, or maybe we should get some IEM for them.
There
as well.
is advantages to that, except for, and especially if you're talking to the guy in the studio, it's pretty annoying for the guy at the front of house to try and keep headphones on and hearing what's going on in the house. At least that's been my experience. I'm like, I'm having a hard time figuring out what to listen to.
Yeah.
So that,
But you know what? Like, what during service? So with while we have service on, let's say, hey, we're gonna do this song instead of this change, whatever, blah blah blah, and then we were able to communicate that through that talkback mic, and the sound tech guy was able to hear and make those necessary changes while in service, and we're not saying, hey, make that change, kind of thing, like a, make it kind of thing. You know what I mean?
that could probably be done, but again, we'd have to think about what that's actually going to look like for the person back here that's trying to listen to the house mix and not listen to their headphones to find out if somebody's about to talk to them or not.
Right.
Because, yeah.
But then we have to send like a text, like, kind of thing,
Tina,
But can you do
Turn the
crazy things
speaker
like that?
on.
Yes, you
turn the
can.
sound on. Turn Alan's mic
However, if
on.
you go to 12,
She knows because I send her text.
if you go to 12 IEMs, you're going to start running out of buses. I'm just saying. But it's possible. We can play around with it. All right. So where are we at? We got grouping live channels together. We got some spares, and they're organized. And then, yeah, they're all sorted.
Input
All right,
buses.
next slide. Hey, we're making progress. Output buses. So 1 through 12 basically will end up probably becoming IMs. 13 maybe becoming your broadcast.
Yeah, you're
And then ba-da-ba-da-ba-dum. And then 14 through 16, I have set up as vocal reverb, vocal delay, and drum verb. Those three effects, I mean, there's a million effects to be had, but those three effects I find to be pretty good.
So like the vocal and the effects you had on the vocals, I liked it a lot. You know, it didn't sound so dry.
And I was actually thinking about changing the Vox verb effect to I right now have it as a hall, but they also have a VSS3 reverb from TC Electronics, which is pretty crazy. But the hall, frankly, there's nothing wrong with what it's currently on. So, all right, and then let's see here, where are we at? Groups. We're not really using any groups, and you don't really have any room for any groups on a digital board. One reason to use groups might be to like group all your vocals together and then put a compressor on all your vocals, or group all your drums together and then put a compressor on all your drums. Those are options, except that you guys ran out of groups because you are probably going to be using a lot of IMs. VCAs, DCAs, we talked about those. Does anybody have any question about what a DCA is and how it works?
No, it just puts everything in one group.
Also, if you want to change, the easiest way to do it is just push that button and then turn things on or off. However, if I go to view, I can also see instantaneously what all of my DCAs are doing. Anybody have any questions?
Nope.
Awesome.
Like I said, it's all gonna,
What was that?
like I said, it's all gonna be a bunch of questions once I start seeing it.
Did it just go away?
Yes.
Would you do that if there was music to me or just kidding?
All right, where are we at? Next, we're making progress now. Cooking with Crisco. Master. We talked about your masters and how your masters are set up. So we're a matrix. So the technical term is matrix, and I am a big fan of them. Once I discovered what a matrix is, I'm like, that's freaking cool. So back to your bus masters. Your broadcast is the actual mix. Alternatively, bus 13 might be the actual mix, but bus 13 would still be sent to the live stream, cry room, hearing assist, and I can have completely separate EQs, effects chains, or whatever else on those three separate mixes, but they're all based on whatever this mix is.
Okay.
Does that make sense? And then they just, so like Cry Room Lobby has, a bit of trying to make the crappy speaker sound like good, and the hearing assist probably will put some sort of low shelf on, just because, well, you don't need a lot of low end trying to blow up your hearing aids, and because we can. All right, but that doesn't have anything to do with that mix. It shouldn't have an EQ on it at all, or that mix. All right. Next, we're making progress. Gain structure. All right. We talked about, in my opinion, gain structure is the bomb. How we did gain structure the other day, I don't even remember. I just mostly did it by ear, and I didn't have all these at 0 the way I should have. And so you could say, did I get the gain right? And we're about to find out. So up here, you see these two A and B things, which look for all the world like SD cards. I click there, and then I go to here, and I go to there, and I go to annoying guitars.
Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought
So he's just bouncing into the, he's a little bit low. I usually like to have him bouncing just into the orange. But it's definitely working. I got plenty going on there. So that's kind of usually what I'm doing. Now this is a compressor that he's running into up there. If you have a gate like on the base, won't see the base gate anymore because But if it's gating, there'll be a red one to the bottom. But I like to have my things just bouncing into that. So say that's not hot enough for me. I want to bounce this up a little bit. That should affect things here somewhere, but that is probably pre-trim, not post-trim. So the meter isn't telling me anything, but that would be something I would fix during actual line checks, just to see, am I bouncing into that? Now let's see what else is actually going
And
on
how
here.
would you fix that?
So these are a little bit hot. The drums are a little bit hot, but not bad. They're actually about right. I'm not clipping, so that's good
Why are the mute buttons flashing?
because I have the drums.
He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood.
And you'll hear so this is just the high, and the high isn't even going into the subwoofer. And of course now he's not playing anything because, well, that would be practical.
The promises of God.
So that's just the high. That's just the low. He's kind of a little bit muddy and undefined, so you need some high to kind of bring some clarity to it.
Separate them
And then the question is, how much clarity do I need given the fact that I've got drums next to it?
Standing on the promises of God, my Savior. Standing. I'm standing on the promises of God.
All right. So, where are we at? So you saw the drums, they're a little bit hot-ish, but they're also, you got 8 drums going into 2 channels, so hot is okay as long as you're not clipping. Clipping is bad. You can be clipping inside the board. It's got floating point dynamics, but if you're clipping on an input or you're clipping on an output, you run out of zeros. I mean, you run out of ones, and your sound, you usually get a maybe like, it's not like the old analog sound you used to get out of clipping an analog board. It's just annoying. So make sure you're not clipping. I like to do my line checks, and if you have a vocalist that gets up there and like, Jesus loves me, this I know, like, is that how you really sing? Yeah, because when she gets up there, she's all excited and worshiping Jesus. She goes, Jesus loves me, this I know, and your whole soundboard turned into a Christmas tree. For their purposes.
That problem with sound check people, yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to get them to sing like they would normally sing.
So the problem is that you have to back their gain up. Well, now you just screwed up all their monitors for not just that person, but for everybody, because everybody is downstream from that.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's
the thing that we've noticed when we make these changes, like to individual mic changes, it changes everybody else's. And so it's now we have a different sound to it, I guess. You know, like my mic will sound different from if Chris got that, you know, changed to it, or Cindy or something like that, and then I don't know, it's kind of weird.
And it could be that those are all different, you know, set at different levels internally or something. Who knows? But I like to do a sound or a line check prior to every rehearsal. It's just a good practice. The
How do
first
you
thing I do
adjust
is
it?
check that.
How do you adjust the line level in?
Oh, so I can't on these because they're cards, but when I'm not in cards, hey look, the bass is happy again.
Can you fix it?
Up here under this
Or
one,
you guys had that problem already before?
this is my gain level, and I can use the knob,
Okay.
or I can just grab it like here. And so I leave this at 0 and use that later if I have to, but this is the actual gain and the
Okay.
one that's going to adjust things. Oh, as long as we talk about gains, if you guys want to use so SM57s don't really care, but if you actually had a real SM81, remember that if I just bump this button, nothing happens, and so my 48 volt doesn't happen. You actually have to hold it down
Till it turns red.
until it actually goes all the way around the wheel. And same thing to turn it off. Otherwise, it doesn't. It was just kind of a cool safety feature until you don't know about it.
Right.
So if you do have a mic that doesn't work, turn your 48 volts on and be a little bit patient to do it.
Do you use the low pass filters on an SM81, or you just leave it flat and do everything
I
at
use
the
low
board?
pass filters on dang near everything except certain instruments.
Okay.
Like if my instrument is supposed to have like a bottom end, I generally won't use one like on my bass, my drums, probably not on my piano. But it may depend on how the piano fits into the mix. Maybe I do have to put one because the bass has got the low end under control. I like a big full piano, so it's because I'm a piano guy. So I tend to not put a big low pass filter on my piano.
What do you mic pianos with for a mic?
What do I recommend? There's a system made by a company called Helpenstill, made by a guy by the name of Charles Helpenstill, that I have put into a lot of grand pianos, and it sounds amazing. It actually goes under the strings, and
Oh, okay.
the idea was
Yeah.
the guy invented it because he wanted his piano to sound like, you know, an electric guitar, and then he discovered that, dang, that makes my piano sound like a piano, but I don't have feedback coming in from everywhere. So,
Right.
I love that system, and that but yeah, it's between 800 and 1,000, 600 and 1,000 bucks depending which version you get. But all right, and what are we talking about next? So good gain structure. You notice up here has got a 0, and then I got +5 and +5 again. I got -5, -5. And then after that, I got a -10, -10, and after that, it's negative a lot. So if you're running your faders down in here, you have absolutely no control. You're like, you know, you look at the fader funny, and you know, you just change the volume significantly. So that's the main reason I like to keep my faders up in here. Besides, you know, not clipping and being well above my noise floor, is I just have a lot more control
Right.
when I'm up in this area. All right, next. There's a good process. It's in your book if you want to read it.
The games.
Was
You know,
that-
I told you that we're gonna be using start using what's it called? Like a synthesizers, you know, piano.
A digital synth.
You know what? You know, I'm gonna be purchasing this week the main stage software. And you know how that one has different types of sounds as well, which is I know something new here is gonna be used. But for example, you know, because of This Is Amazing Grace or other songs that we have those sounds to it, and so with the gain, we have to be, because you know how each effect is different and it hits different, so.
So on the synth and or main stage, like
I could control that.
I used
from
to
the-
play organ. Like I had a Yamaha S90. I played the voice that I made called Worship Band, and I played organ, and I played sometimes an old 74 Rhodes. I don't remember what they called it, Rhodes 74 or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. I mean, on the whole, soundboard of millions of voices. But my organ was always just brutally hot. So eventually I finally said,
Yeah.
rather than me turning it down every time I'm playing it, I actually went in programmatically, turned my organ down so that when I switched between voices, I wasn't killing people.
Yeah.
And then I was just saved permanently. So my recommendation is that the musician, whoever that is, just goes through their sounds and tries to really level them up.
Control
And it's
it
the same
from
with
there.
it's the same with guitars. Well,
Yeah.
do it programmatically, not try and figure it out during the service.
No,
But that, like, hey, I know this voice is typically way hotter than this voice, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But maybe I turn the volume down on one voice and up on another voice if I have any up left. And maybe I just have to turn the volume down on
For
all the other
example, organ's
voices.
a great example where if you're not careful with it,
Yeah, it just kill you.
Yeah.
You want the dynamics, but you know.
But you can make those changes on the computer, on the software.
Yes.
Or just,
Yes, that's my recommendation.
Yeah, that's what he was saying, even with the guitars
And that makes this
everything
guy's
else.
life a lot easier. He can still adjust the volume in the mix, but at
Yeah.
least he's not like, okay, that came out of nowhere.
That's what he was saying about the guitars and everybody else. Where the settings were when they were EQ'd
Right.
is where they need to be set each week when they're using them, not changing their settings, because then they throw out to where you can't make the changes back here to make it sound right.
Well, and like I said, my recommendation is that before every service, you start with a line check. It doesn't take that long, but that way everybody is all, you got different instrumentals, you got different whatever. Line check for me is making sure my gain is right and my EQ is generally right, and maybe a little bit of compression if I have time.
And should we as musicians have, for example, we were taught to have our volume at 75%, and so whenever it was time for us to do, for example, a solo, we just had to kind of crank it up a little bit more, or that in case the sound guy was in there.
So,
because they
I
had to be
mean,
really ready
we'll
for
talk
it.
a little bit about live mixing in a little bit here. The reality is, right now you guys are still using wedges in the house and whatever else, and you're kind of like mixing yourselves. But when you go to IMs, this bad boy becomes the most powerful instrument in the band.
Yeah.
And I'm not even beginning to say I'm kidding. You are really creating and crafting the mix because you guys are all in your own little world.
Yeah.
You're no longer listening to everybody. You're listening to yourself and some of everybody.
Yeah, with the
Um,
IEM.
But, the dynamics and the power and the putting who's who in the zoo, at what part of the song, I need more pads here, I need more piano there, I need like more crunch here, and it's all about the bass at the end of the song, bass and drums, big bass, drum fills, whatever. You could really get a lot of shape the environment back here. And like so when people go to IEMs, you don't even believe how active things have to become. If you're like
Yeah,
a set
I
and
come
forget
from
kind of
IEM
guy,
first,
you need to find another job because it gets real. With the wedges, it's not too bad, but once people go to IEMs, it's a completely different world. All right, we talked mostly about the gain structure and how that's set. Next. EQs, so two main purposes, feedback reduction and making things sound right. Usually they work together. Feedback reduction obviously wins. yeah, it's annoying. So, and the rest is kind of what we'll talk about in the next. So you got graphic and parametric. The reality is that now, oh, look at that. My parametric EQ looks graphic. Woohoo! So now you'll hardly ever even find graphic EQs anymore because you can graphically see what your parameters are doing. That makes life easier. So with that, next slide.
Well, the difference is you
And
have
those are
32
typically used in a
channels on
house.
a graphic one.
Was that?
You have 32 channels to play with on a graphic equalizer. Parametric, 7, 6.
Yes. However, comma, look at how many faders on that 31 band EQ I'm actually changing, and I can be much more precise than I ever could be, because that may actually fall right in between my left and my right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or that maybe I'm actually like 1.6, and I think 2K actually is a one, but say I needed to adjust 1.8, well, now I'm screwed. I can't. I have to pull back 1.6 and 2, but I only wanted the one, somewhere in between that third of a band. So that's why the parametric becomes happier if it's possible. And the graphic effect I can still see generally what I'm doing. Graphic EQs are generally only used on house mixes anyways.
Right.
But I still prefer parametrics because I can get a lot more precise with them. So the parametric EQ used to look like that. Woohoo! That was a little more challenging to work with. You still have those three knobs right here, though. You got gain, Q, and frequency. So as you can see on the Q, if you have the low Q, like if I just say this one, currently it's a 527, but if I adjust that, make it a really low Q, I widen that out. I'm gonna make it a really high Q, I make it really steep. And there's sometimes there's just one little tiny little band you're trying to knock out, and sometimes you're trying to like knock out a swath of frequencies. And generally speaking, on cuts you can be a little sharper. On a gain, you would never have a sharp Q. On if you turn this up, notice that like I do bump a little bit here and I bumped a little bit there, but they're pretty wide Qs. I would never go like this unless I'm doing the seek and destroy method, which we're going to talk about in a second. It's a disaster.
Yeah.
You'll definitely hear a sharp gain. You can put gentle gains on, and you can put sharp cuts on, but generally speaking, you don't want you would never want a sharp Q going up. So frequency moves things back and forth. Wee. And gain is going up and down. All right. Next. House versus channel EQ. So the house has pretty much been EQ'd to be pretty freaking flat, by my definition. You guys might think, well, I have a little bass. I like bass. But what that means is that your EQs to your live stream, you may be doing some adjustment here on your master output, but it probably won't be much. And most of you're not using your channel EQs to EQ the house anymore, like you probably were with the other board because you weren't hardly using any EQs, and they might not have mattered anyways to those speakers. But the EQ will make having the house EQ is a big deal. Then you use the channel EQs to adjust that individual anomaly, that microphone, that vocalist, that whatever. And you're doing a lot less work with channel EQ since your house has already been EQ'd. All right, next. The 7-bed System Dwarves is just kind of a cool little way to think about Dory, Moody, Boxy, Hockey, Sparky, Itchy, and Sibilant. Yeah. That's pretty much where they all are. What was that?
Sound like Lord of the Rings right there.
Anyways,
My
my precious. All right. So that's just a way to kind of think about where those frequencies are. The goal is not to memorize the cool high-speed dwarves, but really to memorize the numbers under them. All right, next. This is a little hard to read, but I might give you guys actual slides so you can go read them yourselves. Or you can just take a picture, that'll work too.
I'm just recording you, so I just recorded it. I can take a
that-
picture of that.
That is kind of my take on most of those frequencies, and
That's in the book too, right?
it is in the book. It's a little hard to read
It's
though.
hard to read.
And the way I learned sound is ultimately I took back. Where is this? Where is that input thingy?
The input thingy? This one?
Yeah,
That input thingy?
that input thingy. So this is honestly how I learned EQ and the numbers associated with EQ. And it's kind of like learning the alphabet, and it takes time, and it takes some practice, and
And I do have one of those adapters, by the way,
Which,
because of this,
Alright.
what he just used for his iPhone.
Yeah, it's different.
I have one of those.
It's gonna burn with the time. For Wednesdays too. I want to put music on Wednesday.
Yeah.
For Wednesday's prayer.
really, I can't get a. I just want a graphic EQ. I can't get one. Killing me. On a graphic EQ, actually, you know what? Let's put an insert in there.
You are exalted. You are exalted. Oh God, I will sing praises forever.
All right. I basically just took two bands like this. And, hey, look, I'm not hearing anything. Yay. Well, that's too low for me to hear. Or it could be there's nothing there in the song. So I go to the next two.
Well, yeah. If you look up your graph here, you can see there's nothing down here.
I can hear a little bit of that. I think the bass is about to drop.
Son of man, take my heart, take my hand.
Now I'll be able to hear it. So let's go here. And take that out. I've used this EQ before, so it's kind of a little. Well, that's. What if I take all that out? That sounds really thin. I'll turn that one up. Muddy. I'm missing everything. Go of here. That's like straight up mud. But again, if I turn that down, I lost a lot of the warmth. Get that to move. What's that boxy sound we're looking at? Kind of low boxy. As you're doing this, you kind of like look at the numbers down below. The world sounds better without those frequencies. Sounds worse with too much of them. Now you're getting into the upper mids. But if I take those out, it takes out like close to sounding like a sock. Now you're getting really close to that part the ear is really sensitive to. Obviously, you got to have enough of that. If I take that out, now we do have a sock going on. But too much of that is just hard on the ears. And then now up here you get to the sibilants. So most of the music is still there, but there's
It's like listening to you on the phone.
now it sounds like that they have a lift. So anyways, that is a way that I learned how to do EQ, is basically with a graphic EQ somewhere, and you just turn them up, turn them down. You can do it with a parametric EQ as well. Just look at the numbers as you're turning things up, turning things down, There's certain things like muddiness or warmth. Well, too much of it is muddy, and not enough of it, it's cold. You know. Next. All right, now let's talk about annoying frequencies. So for this, we're going to go use a card again, and let's take Caesar's vocal.
Are you saying he's annoying?
Nope.
Am I still trying?
Oh, I'm not hearing anything because I'm not doing that yet.
Just kidding.
I'm not.
Let fire come between. The fire from the sky fall.
You just ran, let every breath, all that I am, never cease to worship you. Shout to the Lord of the earth.
Alright, so this is straight out of the microphone. It sounds horrible.
Power and majesty sing praise
first thing I'm
to
gonna
the
do-
King.
Turn the low pass filter on. I'll go up here. Hit that. That will help already. I can adjust that if I want to. But obviously, too much of a good thing is not a good thing.
Right.
Thou wilt sing joy at the work of your hands.
Now, all you have to do is
Forever I'll stand.
That key's too low. Sort of children's. I have to start singing higher.
Cease to worship you. Shout to the Lord.
Yeah, that works.
Of the
Now I can widen that key a little bit.
earth, sing.
Now, when I got rid of that frequency, I have another one going on.
Praise to the
Yeah, this
King. Mountains bow down and the seas will roar at the sound.
That's hard to deal with.
of your name. Shout to the Lord.
Now, I can actually put these out of order.
Forever.
But it'll still work for the frequencies that you have it set to, though, right?
Yeah.
Glory, the King above all kings, who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder and leaves us restless in our wonder. The King of glory,
Got kind of
the
resonance
King
funny there.
above all kings.
When I find that, I'm going to take it down.
This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. That you would bear
No,
my
that-
cross.
because I'm not taking out a lot of lows, I now have a high mid instead of
a
little brutal.
That I would be set free.
Now, just to check.
Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me.
Now, you might think that sounds a little bright, and it does, but the reason is because when I do this,
Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan?
I don't need a lot of low stuff going on in his voice. I want him to cut through the mix. All right. So that is the seek and destroy method of how to find and kill frequencies that you don't like. Obviously, it helps to have an idea of what those frequency numbers mean. So I know that 200 is a low mid, and I know that 1K is a mid, and I know that 3K is a high mid, and I know that 4K is an edge, and 10K is sibilance for days, and I know that I can't hear 6 to 10K. So I tend to be really careful about how much I add to that to make things, because I'm going to kill somebody else because my hearing isn't there. So I know that up front. Otherwise, it could be brighter than he was when I got done. But the it helps, like I said, to know what those frequencies are, so you can go. But that's by narrowing the Q, raising up the gain, and sweeping until you find where it's resonating. Then you just kill it to taste and widen or narrow the Q. So you can kind of, as you start messing with the Q, you say like, "Oh, that's natural," or "Nope, needs more." You can kind of you'll hear it. All right, and I think, yeah, there's actually quite a bit of write-up on there too. I don't think it's on there, but if you get the slides, there's actually quite a bit of talking there. All right, next, compressors. All right, well, let's take good old Caesar and do some compressors on him. So we'll go back to here, to there. Look at me.
Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King.
So the
who
wind compressor is the
conquered
easiest to
grave.
use till you start getting the feeling
Worthy
for how
is
this
the
works.
Lamb who was slain.
That's no.
Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain.
That's what I'm starting to get a little effective there.
Worthy, worthy, worthy. This is amazing grace.
So if I turn it to a sharp knee,
This is
knee is there, I can see right where that elbow is.
that you will take my place.
See, I'm getting about 3 to whatever.
That
The
you
3 to 1
will
is
bear my
4 to 1 is
cross.
max for a vocal, and usually I'd
You
have to more
lay
like
down
2.5
your
to 3.
How about for speaking?
that I will be set free.
So a compressor only affects what's above the threshold. It doesn't affect anything below the
Jesus, I
threshold.
sing for all that you
Once I get this
done
kind of
for
figured out where I want it to be,
me.
and I turn this down a little more and affect it a little harder.
Yeah. All that you done for me. Who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder and leaves us restless in our wonder.
Your
The
tongue's
King
a
of
little bit
glory,
squeezed right there.
The King above all kings. This is amazing grace.
The one thing's gonna make it sound a little more natural is turning the
This is
knee.
unfailing love.
You really kind of 3 to 9 decibels of gain reduction is about as much as you want. So as loud as they get, you never really go more than 9 decibels. Now, because he's a lot quieter now because I've taken out a whole bunch of sound, I can turn up the gain. Whenever I push a button on here, this knob over here becomes its control.
Jesus, I sing for all that you done for me.
So that helps put him back in the mix so he still has his fader where it needs to be.
Right.
Now if I undo this.
Who brings her chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of glory,
So
the King of glory.
his vocal isn't horrible, but it's kind of in and out a little bit.
Just like the sun and all
With this
of
on, it's like way more consistent.
glory, the King above all kings.
Makes the softer parts louder and the louder parts a little bit quieter.
Right.
It makes it just much more loud. It's not going to kill anybody no matter how loud he gets.
That you will take my place. That you will bear my cross. You lay down your life.
Now basically, the idea is that you're knocking the loud parts down. You're bringing the low parts up because I turned the gain up because I basically by taking the high parts, the loud parts down a little bit, I can bring the whole mix up a little bit more, and that makes the end result is that he's much more consistent dynamically. Now you can over compress somebody to the point that they have no life left to them,
Right.
and that's no good. And There is a place on the mains. If I do this just wrong on the mains,
Said I'm failing in love, that you will take my place, that you will bear my cross.
now if I take this one,
You lay down your life, that I will be set free. Jesus, I thank you for all that you've done for me.
Okay, with the piano. Look at here, here, on the lobby.
This is the way you love, that you will take my place, that you
So
will
you're
bear my
compressing the overall.
yeah, and I'm trying to show you kind of what.
down your life,
Listen to this vocal when the kick hits.
that I will be set free. Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of Glory, the King of Glory. Just like the sun and all of His brilliance, the King of Glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you will take my place.
I'm not getting the effect I'm looking for,
Yeah, the
but
pumping,
yeah.
which is kind of surprising. I thought for sure you'd be able to get it with.
Yeah, I mean, you would think I'd be crushing things right there, but also if I have my ratio too high,
No, it's a limiter, right?
All that you've done for me.
but way overkill limiter. And now you can see you just crushed the life out of it. There's nothing left to it. So those are kind of the two big things with compressor is, you know, it works great. What the heck am I listening to? Oh, I know. Listening to the speakers out
The
there.
lobby, yeah, I was hearing them right here.
What am I listening to? Well, so that, yeah, don't over compress things because they start to sound really bad, and know where you can and shouldn't have, you know, your ratio. Basically, the rule is like 3 to 9 decibels, 9 at the loudest, 3. You know, this kind of music, he's pretty consistent volume wise, but maybe he's singing a much quieter song. You might not hit the compressor at all with him for the first half of the song, and then he'll start, you know, it'll start bumping later in the song. Another thing, I went to a little black church, installed a M32 and the same speaker system, but just one of them in a much smaller room. Had their sub on the floor underneath the speakers. Little black church. In fact, the pastor was the chaplain up here at the Cardinals. And soft-spoken guy like I am, you know, kind of when you're just talking to him. But when he started preaching, this guy liked to hear himself. I'm a white guy. I like to preserve what little hearing I have left, so I compressed the bejeebers out of him. And what was happening, and he's like, I had two problems. One, I can't get loud. I can't get loud enough. You know, nobody can hear me. And I'm like, well, they need hearing aids then, because it's like, it was like deafening. But and two, I'm getting feedback everywhere. What was happening is I'd compressed the life out of him when he was preaching, and keeping a low lid on that, which is why he could never get above the compressor and get as loud as he wanted to be. And the second thing was happening is because I had to turn the whole compressor up in order to actually, you know, get him up to kind of that level I was looking for. Whenever he would stop singing, it was basically like taking the knob, like it was compressor on like this, and then whenever he would stop speaking, the fader effectively does this. So he's getting feedback whenever he wasn't talking, which, you know, is like every sentence, you know. So like, you know, just feedback going on for days, and then finally dawned on we have a cultural problem. So I went and backed off his compressor in a serious way, and most of the problems have been solved. It ended up being a cultural issue.
Should have been here about 17 years ago.
What was that?
Should have been here about 17 years ago.
Oh, you had the same problem?
Pastor used to scream.
Oh, did you have this pastor?
Oh, yeah. Used to beat on, he broke
Oh, I
that
remember
pulpit.
that.
Really?
Yep,
Doing just talking?
beating on it and screaming.
Hardcore. So anyways,
Southern
any
Baptist.
questions about compressors? There is one thing that you guys won't probably deal with a lot, but it's important to understand the concepts of, and that is attack and release. The next slide. You can see on there, usually I set my drums and even my vocals. My drums are usually set to about 20 milliseconds of attack, and my vocals usually between 20 and 30 milliseconds, and that enables me to get the consonants and other transients through without getting chopped off. But say I wanted to chop off my transients, I can set my attack time to 0, and then you can see on that picture down at the bottom, I chopped off the transient at the top and kind of leveled off, and I now have more boom. Whereas on the top, I set my attack time a little bit longer with a much lower threshold, and now I have a bang without a boom. Does that make sense? There's actually tools in here called, we were looking at it earlier under, under the gate section. I can go to the wave designer, and I can either turn up the attack or the sustain, and that effectively is a cheating man's method of dealing with the attack and release times. I just say, well, I just want more attack, or I want more boom. You know, it's like, and that's the easy way to do that. Next, gates and expanders. We played with this a little bit the other day, trying to kill the bass. I don't know how well we did, but let's see how well do we do. Setup, main, home, DCA, bass is on. Not good enough. So it's like slightly below that, but if I turn the threshold up, I can do it. Now the question is, if I have that threshold there, am I going to impact the sound of the bass at all? I suppose we could find out by going here, hitting play. coming nowhere close to hitting his gate. So now he's playing relatively hard. And if you go lower it later and there's somebody else playing. No, I'd say we fixed our problem. Whatever that gate was set for. No, what is that? Threshold of -58. We'll leave it there. So that's really what you use gates for. I'm kind of a bigger fan of an expander. It's a little more gentle, but sometimes the gate is what the doctor ordered. Then you can use your release times, or I should say your attack times, to kind of make it take longer to for the gate to work. All right, next.
What can we do to get the, like, for example, the bass, like, to hear more of the finger kind of thing sound, so where it doesn't sound like.
Well, that was the high side would have to be turned up if you want that. The
You
finger.
wanna remove the string slide sound, right?
Or we could hear the kind of like the strings, kind of like, especially like in a praise type song, we could hear the change where it just doesn't sound like kind of thing.
Do you want to hear the strings or not?
Yeah, or at least like a little bit at least.
So
but
partially
we could
that
hear the
depends
changes.
on who's playing it, and like it is in the highs in terms of.
And there's a huge difference between Daryl and Alan playing the bass.
But you can adjust that level as necessary. So that's like no strings.
Yeah, like that, yeah. Yeah, like that.
So you can, and each song is a little bit different in terms of what
Yeah.
level you might want. But. All right, panning. Actually, you guys can do panning in here now, and it'll actually make a difference. Those are left and right, and I believe it'll also affect your mix. Now, when you get to using aux 13, you'll have completely independent stereo mixing. Like completely independent from the house. When it comes to panning, a stereo channel by default is panned all the way, left and right. So like if I have stereo keyboard coming in, it's gonna be left and right. But if I say I wanted to narrow that and not make it quite as much, I can use this width and that'll make it closer to mono. And then I can still pan left and right even with a stereo input. And there's certain things you usually keep in the middle, and this comes back to old records, which the stereo signal went sideways and the amplitude went up and down. And so what happened with low-end instruments, which have a ton of energy, is you'd have to keep those in the center of the groove so that you wouldn't be jumping tracks every time you hit a stereo bass note. So literally that's why to this day most music is actually, the low end is centered in the center channel. Who knew that's where that came from? But it also works because it's omnidirectional. So the kick, snare, bass, and usually lead vocal tend to keep those in the middle. And then other things you can pan left and right, do whatever, blah, blah, blah. And like your guitars, we haven't really dialed those in terms of like which one's going where, but you'll find that you can make a ton more room for your mix if you pan like some guitars a little more to the left, some over to the right. And your violin goes over here, your flute goes over there, your piano is maybe opposite of your acoustic guitar, And you can get by doing, and you're not talking necessarily hard left and right. You're talking, usually kind of like, this or sometimes that, or, just, it doesn't take a lot to make a little bit of space, but your ear actually takes that in, especially in the live stream. But don't do too much, because then when you actually take your stereo live stream and you play it mono, things can get weird. So you have to make sure that you can still make it work. All right, next. Reverb and delay. So we already talked a little bit about this. Your Vox has reverb and delay. And this button over here says tap. It is the tap tempo. So, oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. I like to describe reverb and delay as vocal grease. They really help the vocal cut through the mix. You'll never guess how much effects you have on until you forget to turn it off when the instruments stop playing. But too much of a good thing is just like too much grease is just messy, and too much of a if you have your tap tempo off, it's like getting sand in your grease. It's like something is not working. To give you an idea, let's see where we're at here. Oh, it's pretty short. Do you have anything there yet? Not really.
Shakes before you, the demons run and flee. At the mention of your name, King of Majesty, there is no power in hell or any who can stand before the power.
Like this Bronco isn't really working anymore. It's not really. That's why I showed you this.
The great
doesn't really work as long as you're sick of the music. Also, I think we killed our mains earlier too. What was I going to say? There is also a level over here. So this is the decay time on a reverb, and this is the level of the actual amount of delay. So both of them are controlled from the Vox FX DCA.
is the great I am.
Too much grease effect.
Wanna be near to your heart, loving the world, hating the dark.
So that's
Wanna
sounds
see
reverb.
dry bones living again, singing as one. Hallelujah, holy, holy, God Almighty is the great I am. Who is worthy and of the
That's more delay, but this is a lot more delay.
God Almighty, the great I am.
That's obviously too much.
Is the great I am. The bricks.
Now I bring the rest of the instruments up.
The mountain shakes before you, the demons run and flee. At the mention of your name, King of Majesty, there is no power in hell or any who can stand before the power and the presence of the great I am. The great I am. The great I am. The great I
Alright, that gives you an idea of, like, some songs you'll want a little more of that delay sound, like some slow songs, and some slow songs that are like, okay, let's back that off. Also, a 6/8 song, just do all six. Do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It doesn't really matter that it's going that much faster. What if you're going 1, 3, 1, 3, whatever, or 1, 4, whatever that is? It's gonna be too long and not really work. So just kind of all six and call it a day. All right, next. All right, I think we discussed most of that. Next. Questions. Believe it or not, we're not quite done yet, but we're getting really close. So that's mixology. Anybody have any questions so far?
The whole thing's a question, but we'll get there.
Oh, you'll get there. You got
Yeah.
all your entire life to practice. He says, yes, but so for some of us, that's getting to be less time. Of course, I expect you all to be masters before Sunday. Next.
I didn't know you were a comedian too.
That's right.
You're trying.
Painting the mist. Okay, you remember seeing that kid before? Next.
No.
So first of all, let's talk about monitors. When you start talking about IEMs, everybody's going to need more me. And you can use the app, either WingQ or the Wing Copilot, go up and actually help people dial in their mix, or they can dial it in themselves. And when you get to stereo IEMs, there'll actually be left and right, and people can kind of do that. You can on the mixes, the bus masters, you can actually go here and solo and actually hear what they're hearing. Just remember, like drums, they're gonna need more drums than everything a little bit. They're gonna need more bass than pretty much everything else except drums. They're gonna need a lead vocal. They're gonna need a lead guitar instrument and maybe lead keyboard instrument, and a little bit of everything else. Lead vocalist gonna need way more me. When you sing with in-ear monitors, you need a ton of vocal. I mean, it's like the fader's all the way up here and everything else is down here. It's like the amount of more me you need is crazy. Now, that's not always the case. Some people want to hear everybody else, and you'd be surprised that everybody else actually is out as they are. But that's more the anomaly than the regular. They need more of their own instrument, but like lead vocalist, he's going to want kick and snare, some drum, kick, snare, and bass, and then he'll want some of everything else just for color and feel. Vocalists, they want mostly vocals, a little bit of kick snare, a little bit of drums. They need a piano and or guitars. Maybe not all the guitars, but at least the main rhythm keeping guitars, just so I have some idea of tempo and tonality. But those are going to be pretty low in the mix, and some things they might not need much at all. They probably need more bass than guitars, because most of your tonality when you're singing actually comes from the bass, believe it or not. Your bass is going to need a ton of kick and snare. Some of the other drums, mostly bass, and could care less about anything besides the lead vocal. I mean, everybody's got their own taste, and you'll kind of learn them. And each musician, like I'm a keyboardist, I need a little bit more keyboard than everybody else. But it's important for me to try and figure out, can I get enough of the other guitars so I know when I am or not stomping on somebody else's solo. It's like, so everybody's a little bit different, but you kind of get used to what people are going to want and do your best to serve them. All right. Next. Painting the mix. So we got this cool high-speed picture here. And anybody know where the lead vocalist is in that picture?
The boy.
Yeah, and where are the backup vocals?
The cat.
Yep, where's the lead guitar?
The grass.
I was gonna say the wagon wheel.
Oh.
Kind of cuts through everything, but it's not really the main point of the picture. The boy is, don't forget it. And then your pads, keys, and bass really are, and maybe your guitars, really the rest of the painting. And the lighting is things like EQ and reverb. It's kind of like makes everything works. Yeah, I think there's still one more there.
Is there one more?
Effects.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's kind of my take on painting. But here's the thing about painting a mix is that you're painting in time. Every piece of every song is a little bit different. I got, more dynamics of this and more of this instrument, more of that instrument, more of that vocal, less of that vocal. It's constantly changing in time. It's not like you paint this thing once and call it a day. You're constantly tweaking it. And when people go to IEMs, it gets real. Next. Now we're talking about painting in time. If you're going to make EQ changes, try and do that subtly. And next. And really, we aren't going to use.
Is that the X32
I guess you're
right
from
there?
your own band. That is an X32. I still sell those.
They're popular.
Not everybody is up to a wing. You guys are on the cusp, but you needed a wing, so you have a wing. But a wing is a lot of soundboards. So with that said, let us find some stuff to go play with, and I'll let you guys play with it.